My family ignored me since I was 17. Still, I sent them invitations to my cookbook launch. They always laughed at my cooking. Why would anyone pay to eat that? My cousin had texted. Then a Michelin-Star chef walked in holding my book. It all started back when I was 17. You know, that age when everything feels like the beginning of something important, yet you're still trying to figure out who you are. I wasn't an exception to that. My family had always expected me to follow a traditional path: high school, college, then a respectable job. But instead, I discovered cooking, really discovered it, in a way that consumed me completely. For as long as I could remember, I'd been in the kitchen, playing with ingredients, trying new things. It was my refuge, my passion, and honestly, it made me feel alive in a way nothing else ever did. When I was 17, I finally told my parents that I wanted to go to culinary school instead of college. I thought they'd understand. I thought they'd support me. But no. My dad, who had always pushed the idea of a degree into my mind, stared at me as if I'd just told him I wanted to move to another planet. My mom just looked at the floor, as she always did when the conversation was about me, but her silence spoke volumes. "You're throwing your life away," my father said, voice cold. "You'll never make anything of yourself." "You're better than this, Clara," my mom added, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why can't you just do what's expected of you?" I'd heard that line a lot growing up, just do what's expected of you. To them, that meant pursuing the standard route to success, studying something practical, getting a desk job, and playing it safe. But I wasn't interested in playing it safe. I wasn't interested in being a lawyer, an accountant, or a teacher. I wanted to cook, and I wanted to do it professionally. That night, I felt the weight of my family's disappointment pressing down on me. My younger brother, Matt, said nothing, he just stared at his plate. That's the thing about my family: if they didn't approve of you, they didn't argue. They just quietly erased you. As time passed, my family's neglect became more noticeable. My dad stopped speaking to me unless he absolutely had to. My mom, who used to be my biggest cheerleader, stopped calling. I learned not to expect any more invites to family gatherings. My cousins would send birthday messages, but I could feel the distance between us widening. There was no support, no recognition. It was as if my decision to follow my dreams was something they couldn't even understand. But I didn't care. I got into culinary school, then spent years working my way up. I started at a small cafe, then moved on to a better restaurant, then another, each place teaching me more than the last. I learned about flavors, about the artistry of food, and about what it meant to push myself to be better every day. The whole time, I never reached out to my family. I was too proud to ask for their approval, too hurt by their dismissiveness to let them back in. It was only a few years ago, after I'd established myself as a chef and had built a reputation for myself in the city, that I had an idea. I'd written a cookbook, something that felt impossible when I first started, but now it was real. The book was a collection of recipes that were simple but elegant, accessible but delicious. It was a reflection of my journey, a tribute to everything I'd learned, and a symbol of the woman I'd become. It was everything I wanted to share with the world. And then, I had a thought: what if I invited my family to the launch? I didn't expect anything from them, no gifts, no congratulations, not even a word of encouragement. But maybe, just maybe, they'd see what I had accomplished. Maybe they'd realize that the girl they'd written off wasn't a failure after all. So, I did it. I sent them invitations to the event, even though it felt like I was reaching out to ghosts. The responses, or lack thereof, weren't surprising. My cousin Olivia texted back first, her words dripping with the same disdain I had gotten used to. "Why would anyone pay to eat that?" she wrote. "No one will take you seriously. You should be doing something more with your life." I didn't respond. What was there to say? I had heard it all before. But I still held on to a small hope, even if just a tiny part of me, that they'd show up. The night of the launch came. It was everything I had imagined and more. The venue was buzzing with energy, food critics, fellow chefs, friends, and industry insiders. There was laughter and chatter, glasses of wine being clinked in celebration. It felt like my dream had finally come true. I had worked so hard to get to this point, and I was proud to be standing there, holding my book in front of a crowd of people who appreciated what I had created. The night was supposed to be about me and my book, but when I saw them, my family, standing at the edge of the crowd, it was hard not to notice. My mom, dad, and Olivia were standing together, looking out of place among the people who were genuinely excited for me. Olivia's arms were crossed, and she kept glancing at her phone, as if she couldn't wait to leave. But then something happened. The door to the venue opened, and a man walked in who immediately captured everyone's attention. He was tall, well-dressed, and had an air of confidence that seemed to radiate off him. But it wasn't his appearance that drew my eye, it was the way he walked toward me, his eyes locked onto mine as if he already knew who I was. "Clara," he said, extending his hand. "Marco Rossi. I've been following your work for a while now." He held up a copy of my cookbook. "I had to come by. You've got something special." I blinked, trying to process the words. Marco Rossi? Was he really here? Marco Rossi was a Michelin-Star chef, one of the most respected names in the culinary world. Why would he be here? But there he was, smiling at me as if I was the one who was important. "I've been waiting for this book to come out," he continued, his smile wide. "You've been doing incredible things, Clara. I wanted to be here to congratulate you in person." For a moment, I couldn't even speak. I was too stunned. My heart was pounding in my chest. The crowd around me seemed to vanish, leaving me standing there with one of the greatest chefs in the world. And then I heard Olivia's voice, a faint whisper from the corner. "What is he doing here?" she muttered, almost in disbelief. I looked over at my family, but I didn't care anymore. In that moment, everything shifted. I had done it. I had built something. The family who had rejected me, who had laughed at me, wasn't part of this journey. I didn't need their approval to succeed. Marco talked to me for a while longer, but it felt like a blur. He told me he was a fan of my work, that he had been following my rise in the culinary world, and that he was excited to see where I would go next. He even mentioned that he wanted to collaborate on some future projects. By the end of the night, as the event began to wind down, I had the opportunity to reflect. My family, standing awkwardly off to the side, exchanging glances, still not fully understanding me, wasn't what mattered anymore. What mattered was the people who appreciated what I did, who understood the work that went into every dish, every recipe. And in that moment, I realized I had already won. I took a deep breath, absorbing everything. The event was winding down, and my thoughts were spinning. Here I was, in the midst of my greatest accomplishment, and the people who were supposed to be the closest to me, who were supposed to understand me the best, were standing on the periphery, so far removed from the life I had built. I glanced over at my family again. Olivia was still clutching her phone, probably typing out some passive-aggressive text, while my mom and dad exchanged uneasy looks. I couldn't remember the last time they'd looked at me like that, like they didn't know who I was anymore. To them, I was the same rebellious 17-year-old who had turned her back on their dreams for me. They didn't get it. They never would. But it hurt, nonetheless. There was still a part of me that wanted their approval, even though I had long stopped hoping for it. I caught my dad's eye from across the room. His face was tense, lips pressed into a thin line. He looked older now, more worn down, his shoulders slumped as though the years of disappointment were finally weighing on him. I had stopped expecting any kind of encouragement from him a long time ago. But seeing him there, so close yet so far away, made me realize that no matter how much success I achieved, nothing could erase the pain of that initial rejection. Then, I felt a tap on my shoulder, pulling me out of my reverie. "Clara," Marco's voice broke through my thoughts. He was standing beside me now, his hand outstretched with a warm smile. "I just wanted to thank you again for your incredible work. Truly. The way you combine simple ingredients is an art in itself." He paused, letting the words sink in. I hope we'll work together someday. I'd love to feature some of your recipes in one of my events. My heart fluttered at the idea. Marco Rossi, one of the most prestigious chefs in the world, had just told me he wanted to collaborate. I wasn't sure what that even meant yet, but I didn't care. It was validation in a way that felt so much more meaningful than anything my family could ever provide. Here was someone who truly understood my craft, my passion, and saw it for what it was, something real. Something worth pursuing. Thank you, I managed to say, my voice a bit shaky, but filled with gratitude. That means the world to me. Marco's smile softened, and I noticed how easy it was to talk to him. He had this quiet confidence about him that made everything feel possible. Unlike my family, he wasn't trying to mold me into something I wasn't. He wasn't asking me to change, to fit into a box. Instead, he was celebrating the very thing that had once been laughed at, the thing that had driven me for years. As he walked away, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't concerned with the way my family saw me. I had already found my place in the world. I had already proven to myself that I was capable of more than anyone had ever thought I could be. But the lingering presence of my family still weighed on me. They hadn't left. My mom was now talking to one of the other guests, but she kept looking in my direction. She hadn't come over to congratulate me. She hadn't even said a word to me all night. It was almost like we were strangers. There was a wall between us that neither of us had been able to break down. Olivia, on the other hand, was still glued to her phone, her eyes narrowed as she typed. I couldn't even guess what she was saying, but I didn't care. I didn't need her approval anymore. I didn't need any of them to tell me that I had done well. I knew it already. A few minutes later, I saw a familiar face in the crowd, a face that made my heart skip a beat. It was Matt, my younger brother. He was standing by the bar, looking awkward as usual, like he didn't quite fit in with the crowd. He had always been the quiet one in the family, the peacemaker, the one who never took sides. I hadn't seen him in years, not since I left home. I was surprised to see him here, especially after everything that had happened with the family. For a moment, our eyes locked, and I wasn't sure what to do. There was so much history between us, so much unsaid. But I couldn't just ignore him. Not now, not after all this time. I walked over to him, trying to keep my voice steady. Matt, I said, my tone cautious but warm. It's good to see you. He smiled faintly, but I could tell he was just as nervous as I was. Yeah, I didn't think I'd make it, but I wanted to be here for you, Clara. I could tell that this wasn't easy for him. The weight of our family's expectations, the silence that had stretched between us all these years, it was hard to ignore. But still, there was something in his eyes that told me he was trying. Trying to make up for the years of distance, or at least start to rebuild what we'd lost. I didn't think you'd show up either, I said, my voice softening. I'm glad you did. Matt looked down at the drink in his hand, clearly uncomfortable with the weight of the conversation. He was always like that, afraid of stepping on toes, afraid of saying the wrong thing. But I could see the flicker of something in his expression that made me believe he wanted to understand. I've been watching you, Clara, he said quietly, finally looking me in the eye. From a distance. I always knew you had it in you. I just didn't know how to say it. You know how Dad gets. How he shuts people out. He paused, taking a deep breath. I don't agree with everything he says. You're my sister, and I should have supported you sooner. I'm sorry. The words hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't some grand gesture, but it was something. After all this time, after all the rejection, to hear him say that, it meant more than I realized. It's okay, Matt, I said, smiling a little. I've learned to move on, you know? It's just hard sometimes. I didn't think I'd ever hear that from you. He nodded, looking a little embarrassed. I get it. I should have done more. I'm just glad you're doing well. I can't imagine how hard it must have been to be on your own all these years. I wanted to tell him that it hadn't been easy, that there were nights I felt like I was drowning in loneliness, even as I worked my way up the ranks in the kitchen. But I didn't. Instead, I just nodded. "Thanks," I said, my voice thick. "I'm glad you're here. It means a lot." For a few moments, we stood there in silence, letting the words settle. There was still so much to work through between us, but maybe this was the start of something. Maybe the walls that had been built up between us all these years weren't as solid as they seemed. Maybe, just maybe, we could begin to rebuild. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if my family would ever truly accept me for who I was or if they'd continue to look down on me for following my own path. But in that moment, with Matt standing there beside me, I realized that I didn't need them to validate me. I had found my worth in the work I did, in the people who supported me, and in the life I had built for myself. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. Matt and I stood there in silence for a few more moments, the weight of our past settling between us. But it was a quiet kind of weight, one that felt like it was finally being acknowledged, finally being lifted. I didn't know where this conversation would lead or if it would lead to anything at all, but for now, it felt like a small victory. I had always feared that the distance between me and my family would never close, but maybe, just maybe, Matt's words meant something. Maybe it was a sign that even if my family didn't understand me, I wasn't entirely alone. As the night went on, my attention kept drifting back to the corner of the room where my parents and Olivia were still standing. I could see them talking to one of the other guests, but they were clearly not part of the conversations that were really happening. Their presence, once such a heavy influence on my life, was now nothing more than a distant echo. I realized, with a strange sense of clarity, that I no longer cared whether or not they approved of me. The shame I once felt for following my passion had long since faded. But that didn't mean I didn't want them to see what I had accomplished. I had worked my off for years, and now, with the launch of my cookbook and the validation from people like Marco Rossi, I finally had the chance to show them exactly who I had become. And the truth was, I wasn't about to let them sit in the shadows of my success without at least recognizing their role in it. The night wore on, and the crowd slowly began to thin. People congratulated me, shared their excitement for what I had done, and some even asked for autographs. It felt like a dream, but there was one more thing I had to do before I could let go of the night. I walked over to where my parents and Olivia were still lingering, as if they were waiting for something. They hadn't made any move to come to me, which, to be honest, didn't surprise me. But tonight wasn't about what they did or didn't do. It was about me standing in my own truth. "Mom, Dad," I said, my voice steady as I approached them. "Olivia." They looked up, but there was a certain awkwardness in their posture. My father cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. Olivia, predictably, gave me a tight smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Clara," my father said. "Congratulations. This is impressive. You've really made something of yourself." He gave me a quick, forced smile, but I could see the hesitation in his eyes. It wasn't the warm approval I had longed for, but it was better than nothing. "Thanks," I said, the words coming out smoother than I felt. "It's been a long road, but I'm proud of it." There was a slight pause, then Olivia chimed in, looking at me like she was sizing me up. "I guess I was wrong about you," she said, her tone cold, but her words finally genuine. "Maybe people will pay to eat what you cook after all." I nodded. "It's more than that. It's about finding your place. And being proud of it, no matter what anyone else thinks." There was a moment of uncomfortable silence, and I realized that my expectations of some grand reconciliation were unrealistic. They weren't going to suddenly turn into the supportive, loving family I had dreamed of. But that was okay. I had already moved past needing their approval. I had already learned that my worth wasn't tied to their approval or their rejection. "Anyway," I said, breaking the silence, "I'm glad you could make it tonight. But I have to get back to the rest of the guests. There's a lot going on." I didn't wait for their response. I simply turned and walked back into the crowd. I felt a quiet satisfaction as I did, knowing that I was finally doing things on my own terms. The people around me, true supporters, friends, and mentors, were the ones who mattered. As I mingled and continued to celebrate, I couldn't shake the sense of satisfaction that lingered in the air. The validation I had once so desperately sought from my family was now irrelevant. They had missed the boat. They had missed the chance to be a part of my journey, to truly understand the depths of my passion. But in the end, it didn't matter. I had succeeded without them. I could see them out of the corner of my eye, still standing in the same spot, awkwardly glancing around, unsure of how to exit the event. My father had made no attempt to join me, and Olivia seemed just as disconnected from the whole situation. I could tell they were uncomfortable. They didn't know how to interact with me anymore, didn't know how to face the success that I had achieved without them. But as the night came to a close, I saw them finally gather their things, preparing to leave. My mother caught my eye for a brief moment, and this time, instead of looking away, she held my gaze. There was something different in her eyes, a flicker of something almost like regret. But I didn't care. The years of silence, the mocking, the rejection, it was all in the past now. I was beyond it. Before they left, my dad stepped up to me. There was an odd sense of hesitation in his movements, like he didn't know how to approach me after everything that had happened. He cleared his throat again, and for a moment, I thought he might finally say something meaningful. He started, but the words didn't come out right. He paused, as if struggling to find the right thing to say. "I'm proud of you, Clara." I looked at him, my heart still heavy with the weight of years of disappointment, but there was no anger. Just an understanding that this moment, however awkward, was the closest he could come to an apology. I nodded once, silently accepting it. "Thanks," I said simply, and with that, they turned and left the venue. I stayed for a while longer, letting the night unfold around me. People were still congratulating me, the energy was high, and Marco Rossi even came up to chat once more before he left. But inside, I knew I had gotten what I wanted, what I needed. It wasn't about revenge in the way most people might imagine it. It wasn't about making them feel bad for rejecting me all those years. No, it was about proving to myself that I didn't need them. I had succeeded on my own, and that was all the validation I would ever need. As the last guests trickled out, I stood there for a moment, taking it all in. The book, the launch, the new connections, the life I had created, it was all mine. And I had done it without them. In the end, I realized that the true revenge wasn't in any confrontation. It wasn't in proving them wrong. It was in living my truth, finding my worth, and knowing that no matter what anyone else thought, I had already won.